gentlemen, we are going to call the Planning Committee meeting to order at 6 o'clock according to the agenda. I'm just going to briefly say that Councillor Oakley is joining us online and he's waving. Can you hear us okay, Lucas?
I certainly can.
Okay, so we're connected well there. Councillor Pierce is unavailable. He is on vacation, I believe, in Mexico, so he will be enjoying himself there rather than being here. I'm joined on my right, Matt Vaughn, the Chief Planning Official. Our planning staff is to my right, and our Recording Secretary is to my left, as is our CAO and our General Manager of Planning, Dr. Dusling, is here as well. And I see members of the audience and other applicants in the audience. So I don't believe I have to go through the rules of procedure. I think we are well enough versed that we can carry on, and I will update as we go on. So that is the attendance. The approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions, Matt?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, then the agenda was circulated with an addendum delegation. Would someone move the approval of the agenda? Mayor Bailey moves it, seconded by Councillor Howes. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. The agenda will be as circulated with the addendum attached. There is a provision for the declaration of pecuniary interest. Councillor Garneau?
Yes, we may. Thank you, Mr. Chair. 9.1, the occupant there is a competitor vendor to my spouse's corporation.
And if I neglect to bring that up at the time, you can just excuse yourself and we will carry on. I'll try to remember that, make a note of that. Any other declarations at this time? Again, if you have a declaration and realize it during the meeting, just declare and we'll go from there. The minutes of the previous meeting was circulated. Are there any errors or omissions? Actually, there is one error, and that is on page 10. It shows myself leaving at around 8:25 or something to that effect. And then it shows me seconding a motion after I had left. I believe Councillor Chambers in that regard should be Councillor Coleman, if I remember the situation as it occurred. And I did look at the tape, so that was Councillor Coleman. So that, with that in mind, would someone move the minutes as
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, as amended, as corrected?
Yeah, the item 9.4, which I think runs on a few pages, but round to page 15 of my, or page 11 of the minutes, I think that the approval was given conditional on agreeing further M3 zoning restrictions, and that's coming up in a special council meeting later this evening. But for the record, I think it should include that.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Coleman. All those in favor of the minutes as corrected and amended? Opposed? Motion is carried, and those corrections will be made. Business arising from the minutes. Committee will recall that there was an application or a public hearing with regard to a communications tower at 510 Waterloo Brant Road, and it was deferred to a subsequent meeting the deliberation was deferred to a subsequent meeting for additional information to be looked at by the applicant. That is not on this agenda. I'm just wondering if you could update us on that particular item. Matt.
Through the chair, no additional information has been provided by the applicant at this time, so no action has been taken.
If I read the minutes correctly, and if I remember the resolution, it was deferred until the subsequent meeting, which would be this meeting. So I'm wondering if we could have another motion to defer the deliberation on this particular tower for an additional cycle. Councillor Miller and Councillor Coleman, any questions on that? All those in favor? Motion's carried. And hopefully we can have that addressed at the next meeting. And that takes us to the public hearings. Councillor McAlpine? Can you pull your mic close to yourself and turn it on?
Yeah, no, I was just saying with that deferral, what we might run into a problem if we don't have a March meeting. We were talking about, yeah, so it'd be the next cycle. Okay, after.
Question answered? Okay, thanks. That takes us to the public hearings. And we have public hearings with respect to our communications protocol. And this is the second public hearing with regard to the communications tower at 120 Golf Links Road. So I will call the public hearing to deal with 120 Golf Links Road to order and ask the planning staff to present. As the planner is moving to the microphone, please keep in mind that our role as planning committee is a commenting role, not an approval role. So the recommendation that will be going to council will be a recommendation, basically a comment, not approval. Is there a plan? Okay. And as the planner is just making the adjustments, just to review, the planner will make a presentation. There will be questions of clarification to the planner. The applicant will be allowed to make a presentation. There will be questions of clarification to the applicant if need be, and then we will endeavor to hear from the public if need be, and at that time we can adjourn the hearing and then deliberate on the issue. Are you ready? Okay, carry on.
Apologies. Thank you. I'm presenting telecommunication tower application CT222LG for 120 Golf Links Road. Staff are recommending that Land Squared, on behalf of Share Tower Inc., has completed consultation with the County of Brant and the public, and that the telecommunication tower, as proposed at 120 Golf Links Road, is in accordance with the preferred location guidelines of the Communication Tower and Communication Antenna Preferred Location Protocol. The subject lands are located north of Golf Links Road, south of Highway 403, and west of Maple Avenue North. These subject lands have a frontage of approximately 589 meters and a lot area of approximately 36.8 hectares. The subject lands are located within a recreational facility zone, which contain the Burford Golf Links Golf Course and associated buildings. The subject lands are designated Parks and Recreation and zoned Special Exception Open Space Recreational in the zoning bylaw 6116. The applicant is proposing to establish a 45-meter tall, steel self-supported, lightning protected telecommunication tower that is situated within a 15-meter by 15-meter compound area with a 1.8-meter chain link security fence. As part of the application, the agent has provided a detailed site selection report, a site plan identifying the proposed tower location, and a letter of concurrence request. The site has been reviewed in accordance with the 2020 County of Brant Tower Protocol, and through discussions with staff, the applicant has revised the proposed tower location. The preferred setback is 3 times the tower's height, which is 135 meters, The nearest adjacent residential dwelling is 156 meters from the proposed tower. There are no natural heritage features that are located within the county's preferred setback distance of 120 meters, and no trees or vegetation are proposed to be removed. To conclude, the application has completed the required public consultation and consultation with the County of Brant. The application is in keeping with the preferred location guidelines as outlined in the Communication Tower Preferred Location Protocol. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, do you have any questions to the planner with regard to the proposal? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions through you to the planner. First question, the two things have changed since the original one. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the height of the tower has been decreased and the location's been slightly moved to the east. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, originally the tower height was 65 meters, so that has been changed to 45 meters. As well, the location has changed. There was a septic that it was actually proposed to be in proximity to, so it's been moved away from that. And with them moving it further away, now they're no longer within the adjacent residential dwellings, no longer within that 135 meter setback that's required.
Okay, thank you. And a question of clarification, because I think there's some confusion out there, and I know when we first come out with it, I was a little confused myself. But in our protocol, we say we have to be 3 times the distance from a residence or natural heritage, or 3 times the height. But that doesn't apply to any resident that is on the site itself. Is that correct? It can be as close as it.
That's correct. How we've been assessing them has always been from adjacent residential land uses, not from residential land uses on the site itself.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee with regard to the application? Seeing none, I would thank the planner, and I believe the applicant is online and may wish to speak to the application to the committee at this time.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm Tracy Peelan, planner on behalf of Land Squared and STC. I support the planner's recommendation. The only thing I wanted to add is under the correspondence that was received, there was a question about the towers south. We have looked into those towers, and they are an old TELUS tower, so it is very outdated. And there's actually no lease with the landowner, so that gives you the understanding that eventually those towers will be removed. They cannot support co-location, so even if we did re-enter into a new lease, we would not be able to co-locate any other service providers. And right now, the tower to the south only provides ExploreNet services. So that tower was mentioned in the correspondence, and I just wanted to report back that it is not an appropriate tower for us to co-locate, and a new tower is required in order to have the more appropriate coverage. So happy to answer any questions the committee might have at the appropriate time.
Committee members, do you have any questions? That was difficult to hear. For me, it was difficult to hear. Hopefully it was a little bit loud, and hopefully we understood what the applicant had what she had to say. And we are talking 120 Golf Links Road. I see no questions with regarding this application. So I will, is the applicant still there? Yes. I will ask the applicant to just stand by, and I will ask the members of the public if they have any comments, and if they do, perhaps the applicant may wish to respond. Members of the public, with regard to the communications tower at 120 Golf Links Road, the proposal, is there anyone here who wishes to make comment on that proposal? A second time, is there anyone online with regard to this particular proposal? Then I hear no questions or comments from the public, so I can thank the applicant, and I can ask the committee members if they have any final questions before I close the public hearing. The planner is here to assist. Seeing none, I will declare the public hearing on the communications tower at 120 Golf Links Road adjourned. Committee members, how do you wish to deal with the recommendation? Councilor Miller.
I'd like to move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Mayor Bailey. The recommendation is that it be recommended to council that the recommendation provided by the planning staff be approved. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. That will go to the council meeting on February 28th as recommended on the agenda, that the comments provided be sent off to the applicant. There are no public hearings under the Planning Act. Okay. I've been informed by the clerk that it was negligent in following my own agenda. There is a delegation that I unfortunately overlooked, and that delegation, I believe, is online. Mr. Towler, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, my apologies for skipping over you. You must have wondered what was going on. So, according to the agenda, we have a delegation from Mr. Towler with regard to pending application on 1284 Colburn Street West. This is, my understanding is that the delegation will be speaking about a pending application that is not a complete application. So I would just remind the committee members that the same rules of keeping bias out of your questions or comments, and it will be treated for information only. So Mr. Tej, I think you understand what I just said. You are now able to have the floor, and I believe you are connected. So proceed, Mr. Towler.
Yeah, so Paul Sand Construction would like to propose a development on the Bishopsgate Road for Ethos Automation, which is an approximate 40,000 square foot pre-engineered manufacturing and office facility located just off of Colburn Street West. Is there a slide here that was provided to you guys we can go through with our renderings, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Tage, if you could just pull that up yourself, you could control it and we can view it from there. It is included in the package, however.
Okay. One second here, I'll pull it up. My apologies.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Could I ask a question of Brian? Brian, did you say we had it in our package?
Apologies, I just misspoke. Yes.
We do.
But that's not correct.
That's not correct.
Are you able to see the screen being shared?
Yes, we can see the schematic of the Ethos Automation plant.
Yes, so this is the proposed rendering for Ethos Automation. Again, it's an approximate 40,000 square foot manufacturing and office facility just off of Colburn Street West, located on Bishopsgate Road. Here we have the location and key plan shown here with the subject property. Just near the intersection of Regional Road 16 and Colburn Street West. The proposed lot is to be severed with this lot here pertaining to Ethos Automation. Here are preliminary site plan showing the proposed plant phase 1, approximate area of 3,466 meters squared. with office space over here. The proposed plant has a future phase development. We're looking for an approximate addition area of 3,800 meters squared, and then a future proposed phase 3 of approximately 1,700 meters squared. As you can see, we have parking to the west and east and a proposed septic leaching bed location over here. Subject property shown here facing northeast from Regional Road 16. The diagram below facing southeast on Regional Road. Some more 3D renderings of the building. Again, it's a pre-engineered steel construction building with warehouse and manufacturing plant with offices. Here is our proposed floor plan, preliminary at this stage, with the front office of approximately 6,764 square feet and a warehouse of 35,445 square feet. I'm going to pass it over to Peter Botros and Calvin, owners of Ethos Automation, here to give you guys some insight on their business.
Hi guys, so I'm Peter Botros. I'm the engineering manager over here. Just let me know if you guys can clearly hear me. So we're 7th fastest growing company in Canada, based on last year, and we're not stopping. We're still growing over this year again. We put a little graph showing the job creations that were created over the past 4 years or 5 years since inception until now. So we started with 3 employees, just Calvin, myself, and someone else. And we're at 33 employees right now, and I believe tomorrow we're going to be at 35. So we're really growing. Our anticipated growth over the next 5 years is we're going to get to about 60 to 75 employees. That's depending on our projections and the markets that we're trying to infiltrate. Paige, if we can just move to the next one. The type of work that we're doing and the type of jobs that we're creating, it's all high-end engineering jobs, all skilled trades. So we have machinists, we have millwrights, electricians. We have a whole bunch of engineering staff, from mechanical engineers to electrical engineers, panel builders. And we have a whole bunch of programmers, robot programmers, PLC programmers. So a whole bunch of software people that we're going to be attracting out of the KW area, out of Waterloo, out of Hamilton, and out of Woodstock as well, where the automotive manufacturing facilities are. The type of work that we're doing is we're building full automated cells that are, it's a pretty clean work environment where we're just putting the systems in place. We're ensuring that they work, and then we're disassembling it and shipping it to our customer's facility. So open floor space, like Paige was showing earlier, is extremely required, with minimal obstructions of building columns to make sure that we can fill it to the optimum floor space requirements. Paige, you can go next. All right, in terms of investments, we are investing heavily in the business. Last year alone, we invested just over $500,000 in investments in software, in different machinery, and with these software implementations, we're hiring higher end caliber of talent. Our average wage here, that's between office staff and engineers, is around $32 an hour. So these are really high paying jobs, and it's not warehouse jobs. Paige, next slide. And then some of our customers are multi-billion-dollar companies that work in the automotive sector, and then hopefully within the next two years we get into the food and beverage and the pharmaceutical sectors. Calvin, is there anything else that you want to add on this?
Peter, you really said it all. I'm looking forward to joining the community and being able to bring something really great to the community.
Excellent. And that was all for our slide.
Mr. Teller, does that conclude your presentation?
That concludes our presentation, yes.
Just before I go to the members of the committee, you are aware that uh, the regular application process, you will have to present at a public hearing, and there will be public comment and additional steps to take subsequent to this.
Yes.
And you're here tonight just to provide information ahead of the public hearing, primarily because the application is pending and there are some outstanding issues that have to be resolved before the public hearing can be scheduled. Am I
Correct.
understanding?
As directed by the planning department, yes.
Okay, I understand. Now, committee members, you may have questions to the applicant, keeping in mind that this does have to go through the planning process, and try to restrict your questions or comments to questions of clarification, recognizing that the applicant will be coming back with a perhaps more complete application as we go through the regular planning process. Are there any questions to the delegation at this time? Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To you, Mr. Tyler. Our planning bylaws state that you need X number of parking spots for the size of the building. Not everybody needs everyone that is required, so they ask for an amendment. And my understanding from the Ethos business is that most of the vehicles that go in would mostly be employees, like you're not having members of the public go there. So my question is, looking at your rendering, do you need that many parking spots?
We just followed the bylaw. I believe the current site plan shows 121 parking spaces. We can look to eliminate those if need be.
Well, I'm just, it's just something you might want to think about if you don't need all that space.
You're just asking questions of clarification at this point, Councilor Miller.
Yeah, I'm just giving them something to think about and
Yeah.
a little more. So, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? I see no further questions, Mr. Towler. I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and we look forward to a complete application and carrying this on through the planning process where we have a public hearing and make recommendations to council. Is there anything final that you would like to say before I move on with the agenda, Mr. Towler?
No, just thank you for the council's time this evening.
And thank you again. That concludes the delegation, and now we can revert back to the place on the agenda where I had skipped ahead, and that is with regard to the public hearings to consider staff recommendations. 9.1, Councilor Garneau has declared a conflict, so I allow her to remove herself from the table, and our planning consultant is making her way to the podium. Marissa Williams from the planning firm that we have engaged to assist our planning staff with regard to this application. I will declare the public hearing open and ask the planner to review the application for the committee.
Can everyone see the presentation on their monitors? Thanks.
You're going to have to speak louder and
I
perhaps into the
apologize.
microphone.
Yeah. I tend to have a low voice. Good evening. I'm here from WSP, acting on behalf of the county on this particular planning application. This application in front of you today is for a zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 44-22-DN. The subject land is located at 409 German School Road, and the agent or applicant for this application is IBI Group, and they're representing the landowner Leslie Drake. The subject land is located approximately 6.5 kilometers west of St. George and approximately 4 kilometers north of Brantford on the north side of German School Road. The property has approximately 341 meters along the frontage of German School Road as well as the approximate size is around 38 hectares. The official plan and zoning for this particular site, according to the official plan, is that it's subject to designated as an agricultural and natural heritage system within the agricultural area. As well, within the zoning bylaw, it is zoned as agricultural and natural heritage zones, and the site consists of a single detached dwelling on the east side of the natural heritage feature, an agricultural use to the north of the single detached dwelling, and the natural heritage feature that bisects or transverses the subject land across the southwest portion. The surrounding areas are also mainly zoned as agricultural. In terms of the existing conditions of the site, the subject land has currently access from German School Road through the forested area and the creek crossing across the southeast corner. Sorry about that. The existing residence is in the center of the property on the east side of the natural heritage feature, and a portion of the portion north of the existing residence is mainly used for agricultural purposes. At the southwest corner of the property is an existing cleared area of approximately 1.2 hectares located outside of the natural heritage feature. This is where the applicant landowner is proposing an additional residential unit. The purpose of this application are as follows. First, to rezone a portion of the subject land from agricultural to agricultural with special exceptions. To establish an additional residential unit on the property, and to rezone a portion of the subject land from agricultural to natural heritage to protect a 30-meter buffer around the additional residential unit for the long-term protection of that natural heritage feature. The applicant and landowner explored 3 options in determining where they should locate the additional residential unit. 2 of the options were not feasible due to the existing site conditions and the proximity of the natural heritage features to where they were hoping to put the additional residential unit. The preferred option is to locate the additional residential unit on the southwest corner of the site away from the natural heritage area. This preferred option meets most of the criteria as set out in the county zoning bylaw with the following exemptions. First, the additional residential unit is located approximately 400 meters from the primary dwelling, where a maximum of 40 meters is permitted. The additional residential unit is to be accessed by a separate driveway entrance where a shared access is required. And thirdly, the additional residential unit development area is approximately 2,263 square meters, where a maximum of 450 square meters is permitted. For these reasons, an amendment is required to rezone the subject land from agricultural to agricultural with special exemption to establish an additional residential unit on the subject land. The application was circulated to various internal and external agencies for review in mid-December of 2022, and there were no concerns raised for this application. Public notices were circulated per the Planning Act and the County Official Plan Policy. There were 2 public inquiries and 2 letters of submission at the time of publication of the report. In my opinion, I'm supportive of this rezoning application as it is consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2020. It's in conformity with the growth plan, and it also conforms with the County of Brant Official Plan of 2012. It also meets the intent of the county's zoning bylaw, and therefore it is recommended that we approve the application. This concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, with regard to the proposal, do you have any questions of clarification at this point? Councillor McAlpine first, and then Councillor Bell.
So I'm very concerned about this application.
Again, just questions of clarifications at this time. You'll have a chance to deliberate at the appropriate time.
When considering the locations, did you consider an ARU within the house that exists already that's 4,000 square feet?
That was not what the application was for in terms of deliberating where it should be located. So no, that wasn't as part of our review.
Okay.
And recognizing that the applicant will have the opportunity to present some of the questions may be asked of the applicant as well. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our presenter. The land that is being proposed for the ARU, what is it currently being used for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's currently being used as, it has been vacant, or a vacant area that has been used for bringing in soils and processing soils as part of the landscaping business that is there at the moment. Reviewing historical aerial photographs, we've noted that this site has been vacant for some time, and we feel that it isn't impacting on the agricultural use, which is located to the north of the site, of the actual property, within the property.
I'll follow on if I may, Mr. Chair. If this ARU is approved, or the zoning bylaw is approved, would that current use of that land continue, or would it end?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the agricultural uses that are currently happening on the property will continue, to my understanding. The business operation of the landscape function will cease once the development of the ARU occurs.
So if I may, to be clear, the landscaping operation, is that operated by the owners of this property?
To my knowledge, yes.
Thank you. One more question, if I may. The ARU, is it planned to be a property that will be used by the owners of the residents, or will it go to be used as a short-term rental?
Mr. Chair, I will defer that question to the applicant.
Thank you.
Any questions of the planner at this time before I ask the applicant to come forward? Councillor Kyle.
Sure, I have a question, and then I see that Councillor Oakley does have his hand raised as well. But my question is, so the 3 exemptions that they're asking for with this application, there's 3, but they're 3 fairly big requests in my interpretation. So just wondering what the threshold is for, like when you're going through a planning application, why it could be approved when there's such big discrepancies between what the rules are and what they're asking for.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. When we're evaluating an application, we look at a number of things, and one of the key things that we looked at in this particular application was the avoidance of natural heritage features and natural heritage hazards, which is the creek that goes through the property. In order to avoid those areas, and also for the long-term preservation of the natural heritage feature that is within on the site, it was determined that the actual setback needed to be further from the road than what was anticipated in the original zoning bylaw. So in retrospect, we look at a number of criteria when we're reviewing an application, and in order to achieve preservation of that natural heritage feature, we thought that outweighed the requirement of a longer distance from the main road.
And thank you for pointing me toward Councillor Oakley. You have a question.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the planner, sort of along the lines of what Councillor Kyle was asking. Could I ask you to expand on the other two exceptions as well? In regards to both the size of the property, the additional entrance, and then sort of what the methodology and reasoning is determining where we are very flexible with going out of spec like we are here versus where we seem to be more rigid in some of our more urban applications on what are on following our rules versus not doing so.
If I understand the question, Mr. Chair, in terms of this particular application, we felt that the location of the additional residential unit would be a modest or actually relatively low growth associated with it, and using an existing informal roadway into the property, felt that it made a reasonable it was reasonable to consider that as appropriate. I didn't quite hear everything that you mentioned about further restrictions versus in the urban area versus the rural area. I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that part of the question.
If I may, Mr. Chair, what I was referring to in that regards would be, for example, in our downtown Paris areas, we're very rigid when it comes to approving things that are out of spec. For example, on-site parking. Here, we're out of spec in 3 categories. The third of which we haven't addressed would be the size of the proposed development is 5-fold out of spec to our bylaw. So I was just curious as to the methodology for being that out of spec for 3 different aspects of our bylaw.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I understand correctly, the size of the development actually includes the buffer area, the 30-meter buffer to protect the natural heritage feature, as well as incorporating enough space to provide for the private servicing that's required for the site, which is the cistern and septic. And I'm sorry, there was another item that they need to provide the wastewater management piece that would go along. So the actual size of the development area needs to be a little bit larger than you would see in a serviced location, which would be within a built urban boundary. I'm not sure if perhaps Matt can, the planning director, can add to that question. And I think I understood. I think I understood what you were mentioning. I didn't quite hear it again, but
perhaps Matt can assist.
Through the chair, nothing further to add unless Councillor Oakley has any additional questions or some follow-up.
That's sufficient for the time being. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Oakley. Any other questions of clarification? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the planner. Given that it's we're trying to rezone from ag to agriculture with site-specific provisions, I didn't see it, but I'm wondering, did this go through the Ag Advisory Group, and what were their comments?
I can help with that one. Through the chair to Councillor Miller, this one did not make it to the Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Any final questions before I go to the applicant? Councillor Kyle.
Apologies, one more question through you, Mr. Chair, to the planner. And I'm not sure if you can answer this question or not, but just given that they're asking for a separate driveway, does that mean it's going to have a separate address for emergency services, that type of thing?
Yes, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that would be required. Fire, building codes, all that would be required as part of this application.
Okay, thank you, and I'm going to ask the applicant to come forward at this time and perhaps expand upon the application.
apologize. So I'm representing the applicant. As you probably remember from me being here before, my name is Douglas Stewart. I want to first start off with that I am of the opinion that staff and the consultant have looked at what the issues are. Conformity with provincial, conformity with the county, and I think we need to step back and look at, in planning, we're always dealing with competing interests. And it's how you evaluate those competing interests and determine a planning opinion. The county staff have done that and reached a conclusion that this request has looked at the issues, dealt with the competing interests, have looked at provincial policy, have looked at county policy, and reached a determination, a professional planning opinion, that this application conforms and is recommended. Representing the person who's made the application, I went through the same process. It's my professional opinion, when you consider all of the factors, consider what the provincial plans say and what the county plan provides for, that in my professional opinion, this request meets and conforms to and is appropriate. The staff, through the proposed bylaw, have dealt with those regulations that require a modification. The staff have dealt with the way this would be implemented. Stepping back, we looked at every option that the additional residence provides for. Within a building, expand a building, in another building, or a fresh building. We looked at all of those issues, and the determination isn't whether a family member or a friend or an uncle or an aunt is requiring housing. It's, is it appropriate to have an additional residence? It's not tied to any specific group or any issue that way. The person who's made this request has looked at those issues as county has and we have. It's not in the request, doesn't deal with inside the existing house. And I can't explain why, the reasons, other than that's their decision, that they believe that that's not an appropriate place for it. When you look at the big picture, it's in a natural environment area surrounded. It's across a portion of the Fairchild Creek on a single point of access. So a determination was that's not the place. In fact, the conservation looked at the same way and came to the same conclusion. The request is still on the same farm parcel. It's in a location where, from an agricultural point of view, it has its restrictions, it has some issues. When you look at what's been there and it could be there, when I look at some of the surrounding people's comments, it's more about the impact of the landscape business is their issue. What this request will deal with that, as it says in the report, as we've provided to the county, that business would not function in that location. Also, what's important is what the applicant has looked at is said they need another building on their farm for the storage of and protection of equipment that they use on the farm. They're going to propose a building in that location to address that, and that's not part of this request. So in fact, they're going to look at putting the additional residence within a proposed building, looking like a farm building, which is, I think, tremendous. I think I've heard some concerns that it looks like it's a good location for a land severance. Well, the public policies would prohibit that. Council would have an influence on that, as would the Committee of Adjustment. In my professional opinion, this isn't a location where a land severance could be considered, would be approved, and be supported by the province, the county, or this council. The policies are permissive to allow for additional residences. This applicant has gone through the process. The county staff and consultant have evaluated it and reached a determination. It's their opinion and are suggesting to this group that they support staff and recommend to council to approve the request and pass the bylaw. I'm here to say I'm making that same request on behalf of the applicant. And this concludes my presentation. I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Committee members, again, opportunity for question of clarification. There's the opportunity for deliberations after I close the public hearing and hear from the public. Are there any questions to Mr. Stewart with regard to the application for clarification purposes? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Stewart. Could you share with me what the intention is in terms of occupation of the additional residential unit? Is it for people living, working on the farm, or is it going to be for another purpose?
If I may reply through the chair to the councillor. When we started the process, a person who was supportive of the property owner, they were interested. Unfortunately, the process was taking too long, so they have found an alternative place. I don't know who's going to occupy, but that's not part of the criteria, in my opinion.
Any other questions? Councillor McAlpine.
So just for clarification, because of the nature of this building that's being built and the potential for storage and the excess size of it beyond the requirement for your ARU, I just want to clarify that there's no other business that's being anticipated to be located at this location?
If I may, through the chair to the councillor, the request is for an additional residence in this location. The request is that they will be proposing an alternative building for the storage of equipment, and they propose to merge the two. Any intent beyond that would have to prove it conforms to the bylaw in effect. I'm not aware of any business being proposed, but again, I stand by that any request would have to comply to the approved bylaw.
Any final questions before I ask the applicant to step down and hear from the public? Okay, we've heard your representation. If you could just stand aside, I'm going to ask the public if they have any comments, and recognizing that you may want to come back and address some of the concerns if they bring it forward. Members of the public, this is your opportunity to address the committee. Would anyone like to comment on this proposal? If you do, please come forward, identify yourself and your address, and you have approximately 9 minutes to make a presentation. If you go beyond 9 minutes, I will stop you and ask you to sum up, and you'll have an additional minute to sum up, so we'll give you 10 minutes to make your presentation. Anyone wishing to come forward at this time? Gentleman at the back. As the gentleman is bringing himself forward, I will make comment that we have had written correspondence from, I think it's Mr. Rosum and Ms. Beatty, I think it is. Proceed.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James Rowsome. I own and reside at 424 German School Road. It's a rural residential property that is directly across from the subject land, 409, the German School Road. I've got here, for simplicity's sake, of referring to the subject land as 409 for the remainder of my presentation, if that is admissible. I'm here to outline my concerns regarding the application to rezone the subject land from agricultural A to agricultural special exemption to establish an additional residential unit on the subject land. I'd like to give a brief history, if I may, of my observation of the use of 409 German School Road. I feel this will help to explain my concerns with the application. The subject land at 409 is described in the application as an isolated field. It is hardly isolated. In fact, the entire south side of this field abuts German School Road, as does my home directly across the road. I say again, it is hardly isolated. It was said that this is a vacant field. It is not vacant. However, 409 is zoned agricultural and was simply a field up until sometime between 2014 and 2016, when things changed. At least part of 409 was bulldozed and now contains large piles of gravel, boulders, stone, and topsoil. The land, in my opinion, has been desecrated and laid waste. I see this as a complete abandonment of agricultural stewardship by the current landowner. The current use of 409 has caused me diminished enjoyment of my property in the following ways. Dump trucks and heavy equipment enter and exit 409 at all hours of the day. This causes so much noise and vibration that sometimes even the windows of my house rattle. I am subjected to the constant noise of these trucks gearing down, braking, and rattling. The slamming of the dump truck's tailgates actually shakes my house. There is a noise of reverse beepers from the trucks. There is a continual all-day noise of earth-moving equipment, as well as a noise of screening out the topsoil from the fill contained in the dump site. Truck headlights beam into my house at all hours of the day. In dry climate, the dust created by the industrial activities at 409 blows onto my property. If the trucks track mud onto German School Road, this is a safety issue when the mud is wet and slippery. When the mud dries, there is increased traffic noise as the vehicles drive over the bumps. 409 is an eyesore by virtue of being converted to an industrial dumping site. Because of the problems I experience with 409 now, I'm very worried by the proposed application. Here are my concerns. Nighttime vehicular traffic. Vehicular traffic in and out of 409 currently occurs during daytime hours. However, having a residence at 409 opens the door to nighttime vehicular traffic as well. The noise caused by this would further reduce my enjoyment of my property, as would the visual disruption of headlights beaming into the windows at the front of my house, including my bedroom window. I am concerned by the radical nature of the proposed bylaw amendments. The proposed ARU is far over the 40-meter limit from the primary residence. ARUs are not supposed to be located such as they can be severed, but the location proposed is ideal for severance. Landowners, in my opinion, should not be allowed to change the laws to suit themselves. The approval of these bylaw changes sets a dangerous precedent. This will lead to further destruction of agricultural lands in Brant County and more homeowners being negatively impacted by future development. I am concerned that the proposed structure could be. I doubt very much that any future activity at 409 will be agricultural based on my observation and experience with this site. I am therefore opposed to any real estate development on 409. I am seriously worried that things will go from bad to worse at 409 German School Road, therefore going from bad to worse for myself and my home. I would like to see this field return to full agricultural use. And in closing, I'd like to stress that my enjoyment of my property will likely be dramatically impacted by the changes proposed at 409 German School Road. And that impact to my property should be considered in the application. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you, Mr. Rossum. I will note that we do have a copy, the committee members have a copy of your letter that you submitted.
Okay.
And thank you for the synopsis.
Thank you very much.
Any other person in the audience wish to make comment with regard to this application? Anyone else? Then seeing no other public input, perhaps Mr. Stewart, you would like to come back and address the comments from the public.
I've read the written response and it's been reflected in what was spoken here. I'm not here to speak to what's occurred in the past. I've been retained to bring forth this request to give my planning opinion, and it remains my opinion that the official plan, the provincial plans all support what's being requested here. I'm not going to speak to how a property has been looked at or addressed from the past. That's not within my scope. And I'm not here to say the concerns expressed aren't concerns. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this request may improve the situation because the agricultural landscape business would stop when this is constructed, and those issues may no longer be in place.
Okay, that concludes the public hearing. We've heard from the applicant, we've heard from our planning staff, we've heard from the public. I'm going to ask our planning chief planning official, do you have any comments or wrap up to the application before I close the public hearing?
Through the chair, no additional comments. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, then I will declare the public hearing with regard to this application closed, adjourned. And since there are not a lot of public hearings to go through tonight, let's deliberate upon this application at this time. Does anyone feel comfortable in moving the recommendation as presented, recommending it to council for approval? Councilor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move it to get it on the floor, then I would like to speak. Thank you.
And seconded by Councilor Bell. The motion is that the recommendation as printed on the agenda be forwarded to council for their consideration, recognizing that it is a recommendation for approval. Discussion. Councilor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to see this deferred so it can go to the Agriculture Advisory Committee. This somehow got missed. We had no meeting in the past month due there was a conflict with some other arrangements with staff and whatnot. I believe this should go to the Agriculture Advisory Committee. That's what the committee is there for, and I would like to see it go to there before a decision is made. So a recommendation can come back to this committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chair.
Just before I deal with that suggestion, are there any other comments or discussion with regard to the proposal? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at it from a distance, it would seem like it's an end run around our zoning bylaws. The property that is proposed, described, is significant property. I think it's 2,000 square feet, half of which is for storage, half of which is for a residential purpose. But what troubles me most, I think, is that the exceptions that are being called for are not minor in nature. From my time when I was on Committee of Adjustment, I would call something which was 10 times the permitted level not to be minor. There is a binary choice as well. The second exception was a separate exit, when our bylaw says very clearly you have to use the same exit. I think we set a terrible precedent if we approve this. There are many properties, I suspect, in our county that could follow this line of argument. Final comments, there are strong objections from the neighbours and actually strong objections from our First Nations who very clearly say they don't support it. So I would not support this if we do vote tonight.
Any other comments? Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, and I guess to you, at this point, it's too late to ask a question of staff. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I will just make a comment then, and that is, like, I share some of the concerns and reservations about this, and I also just wanted to make a comment. Like, I was trying to visualize this in the scope of an agricultural lens, and I was trying to picture in my mind. You know, we all know horse facilities where there's an accommodation built in where somebody who works at the horse operation lives there. And so I was trying to visualize this through that lens, and it occurred to me that I haven't seen anywhere in this application a representation of what this building is supposed to look like, unless I've missed that. That's just a comment that if we do end up seeing or hearing of this in the future, I think that might be helpful. So those are just my comments. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Kyle. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think first I agree with Councillor Coleman's suggestion that it be deferred, but aside from that, as far as some comments, I do have some concerns about this one, just given that it doesn't seem to fit within the spirit of what the ARU is, just given Councillor Bell and Councillor Howe's comments about, you know, such a drastic departure from what the rules are. I also, just kind of looking at it from an agricultural lens, also am curious about what the intention is for the building, and whether that is something at some point we might be able to find out, because for me, as a farmer myself, if I'm going to be building an implement shed of some kind to house my expensive equipment, putting it so far away from where the rest of my buildings are doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I have some curiosity about perhaps what the intention is for the outside of the ARU part. Obviously that will be living quarters for someone, but what the rest of the building is for. It seems a little bit off to me.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mayor Bailey.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't support deferring it just because it's so far off whack right now with three things that aren't even close to the bylaws that I wouldn't want to see anyone else get involved. I don't know that we need to involve the Ag Committee right now. It's not really an agricultural thing. It's an application that doesn't qualify in very many ways. So I don't support the deferring, and I won't support the application.
Are there any other comments? Okay, oh, sorry. Thanks, Councillor Kyle. I missed you again, Councillor Oakley. You have the floor.
That's okay. I would also just like to mirror some of the opinions of my colleagues here in that with this proposal being wildly out of spec with three of what I would call the major defining criteria of ARUs, that doesn't really fit within the spirit of it and thus is largely inappropriate to be proposed as an ARU. And similarly, I do not look to be supporting this proposal.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, let me, by way of explanation, there's a motion to approve the recommendation of the planning staff that it be forwarded to council for approval. There's been a suggestion that it be deferred for one cycle to hear from the Agricultural Advisory Committee. That's not on the floor at this time, and I'm going to speak to that in a minute. When there's a motion for approval, there's I think 5 things you can do. You can either support it, you can either not support it, or you can do one of 3 things, and the subsidiary motions are in order if they're put. One is to amend. You can amend an application or a recommendation provided it doesn't change the application such that it requires a new circulation and a new public hearing. So you have to be careful about, if you're making amendments, that you don't amend it such that it requires a new application. Second thing you can do is defer, which puts it to a subsequent meeting. You should define the time limit of a deferral, and that puts it to another planning committee meeting subsequent to this one. You have to be careful of that because of the time frames for applications. Once an application is deemed complete, the time clock starts and you have 90 days to deal with it. And if you don't, it's subject to appeal for non-decision, and now with the new act, subject to refunds if need be. So again, you have to be cautious about deferring applications. The other thing that you can do is refer. You can refer the application to council. And if you do that, then it takes the matter and puts it on council's desk to decide the application. If you wish information to be provided in addition to information that has already been provided, the prudent thing to do, in my opinion, is to refer it to council with the direction to have the information presented at the council meeting so that council can make an informed decision. So, having said that, you can amend it, you can defer it, but be cautious, or you can refer it for council to make the ultimate decision, which they make anyway. Or you can either approve it or not approve it. So I've had a suggestion that the application be deferred for one cycle to have input from the Agricultural Committee. Is that motion being put? It's not being put. Are there any other amendments before I call the question on the motion that it be that the recommendation be forwarded to council for approval? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion to approve is lost. Can I have a motion to recommend that the application be refused? Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Howes. The motion will go to council as a recommendation for refusal if this recommendation passes, or this motion passes. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. The recommendation on this application will be going to council recommending that the application be refused. And at that time, if you have any questions of staff, you can put them at that time. Let's move on to the next application, application 9.2. And Planner Nemizniak is making his way to the podium, and Councillor Garneau is making her way back to the table. And I will declare the public hearing with regard to 9.2. It's 655 Watts Pond Road. The hearing is now in session. Dan, could you present the information to the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a zoning bylaw amendment application for the property located at 655 Watts Pond Road. And I believe our agent is with us this evening virtually. Planning staff are recommending approval of this application. So the subject lands are located on the north side of Watts Pond Road. They are highlighted in blue as they exist today. The application is proposing to rezone the portion highlighted in blue outside of the woodlot area there. It's approximately 22.8 hectares, and it has the application proposes to rezone that portion from agricultural to our agricultural special exception A9. And just to remind the committee, this is a site-specific zoning that we have in place, which permits all agricultural uses, but prohibits a new dwelling to be established on this parcel. And this application is required as a condition of consent application, which was approved by or conditionally approved by the Committee of Adjustment in December of 2022. Also note that the 22.8 hectare parcel is being consolidated with the parcel, the benefiting parcel identified in red to the west of the subject lands. The subject lands are designated agricultural. The benefiting parcel there identified in gray is designated resource development. The zoning on the property is agricultural, and again with the proposal to remain in the agricultural zone but prohibit the dwelling as a permitted use. And the benefiting parcel is resource extraction EX zone. So in terms of process, we are the application's been circulated with staff report prepared with a recommendation, and we're looking for a decision from the committee. So it is my professional opinion that this application be approved for the reasons outlined in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dan. Committee members, do you have any questions to the planner with regard to the application? Councilor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you, Dan. And just reconfirming, no concerns from the public at all related to this, correct?
Through Mr. Chair, that is correct. No concerns have been received from the public through the public circulation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the applicant, I believe, is on the Zoom. Mr. Phillips, can you hear me? Is it Mr. Phillips? It's Rashika. Sorry, Rashika. Can you outline the application to the committee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm actually filling in for Bob Phillips. He was having some technical issues with the Zoom link and the call-in number. So I believe Dan has done a great job explaining the application. It is a result of a surplus farm dwelling severance that was conditionally approved in December. by committee of adjustment. So as a requirement of the surplus farm dwelling severance, we need to rezone the farm to prohibit a dwelling unit so that no new lot is created. And the farm will be the 22 hectare approximately farm will be merged with the property to the west of this. And I believe, I think that summarizes everything, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the planner? I see no questions to the planner, so just stand by, Rashika, and I'm going to ask if there are any members of the public wish to comment on this proposal, 655 Watts Pond Road. I see no one in the audience coming forward. I'll ask the planner if they have any, if he has any last comments with regard to this proposal.
No comments from me, Chair. Thank you.
Then I will adjourn the public hearing and ask the committee how they wish to deal with the application. Mayor Bailey.
Motion to approve, please.
Okay, a motion that the recommendation as it appears on the agenda be forwarded to council with the recommendation for approval. Do I have a seconder? Councillor House. Any questions? Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried, and that will be a recommendation going to the planning committee meeting, or actually the council meeting, February 28th.
Thank you.
And the record will show that Councillor Coleman has an engagement that he has to leave the committee. And that brings us to 9.3 on the agenda, the application with regard to 238 third concession. This is a little bit of a different application in that it is an application to remove a holding provision on a zone. And there are a couple different stipulations on how to deal with these, and I'm going to ask the planning official to explain to the committee.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, typically the removal of a holding is not something that would need to come to committee or council. However, in the case, staff are bringing a report and presentation forward, just more to inform the committee of the great work that's being done on site. A good example of another great business coming to the county and flourishing here in the county. And that's about all I really have to say about that. So I'll refer to the planner making the presentation.
Okay, recognizing that we don't have to have a public hearing, we're going to have one anyway in terms of transparency and making ourselves available for public comment. So I'm going to declare a public hearing with regard to 238 Third Concession Road to hear from the planner, the applicant, and perhaps members of the public with regard to this application. The planner is at the podium ready to make the presentation.
Good evening, Council and members of the public. An application has been received to remove a holding provision from J.H. Cahoon Engineering on behalf of the owner, PrimeTech Precision Inc., for the land civically known as 238 3rd Concession in the geographic township of Burford. The subject lands are located on the east side of Middletown Line Road and on the north side of 3rd Concession Road. They are irregular in shape and have an approximate area of 19.2 acres. And an approximate frontage of 75.2 meters along 3rd Concession and an approximate frontage of 238.8 meters along Middletown Line Road. The lands are currently vacant. The holding was applied as part of a settled agreement through Bylaw 72-04, which applied the holding provision, which permitted existing land uses while reserving these lands for future industrial uses. The applicant is now proposing to remove the holding provision, changing the zoning from heavy industrial with the holding provision to heavy industrial, M3. This is required in order to permit the development of these lands for an industrial use. The lands are currently designated employment and are located within Site-Specific Policy Area 16 within the County of Brant Official Plan, and are currently zoned as heavy industrial with a holding provision, so H-M3, within the County of Brant zoning bylaw. I am recommending approval of the proposed rezoning for the reasons outlined in my report. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions to the planner? Councillor Miller.
Just a question through you, Mr. Chair, to the planner. Did I answer this question correct? Because I was asked why M3. And my response was the M3 designation sailed long ago when it was first designated. We don't have any influence over that tonight, just the H. That's correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
And just a minor correction, it's zoned, not designated. Any other questions? Thank you, Shannon. And I'm going to ask if the applicant is, I believe, joining us on Zoom as well, and I believe it is Rashika as well. There she is. You have the opportunity to expand upon the application for the benefit of the committee.
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of committee. Again, I'm filling in for Bob Phillips. Again, Shannon has explained the application very well. It is for removal of holding provision for site plan application, site plan control applications near completion. That's what my understanding is, and we would need the removal of holding to be completed so that a building permit can be issued ASAP. I'm not sure if this is the correct avenue or the time to request to the committee. I understand there is a special council meeting right following this meeting to hear another bylaw. This application is for expansion of employment uses in the county. We would really appreciate if committee members can consider bringing the bylaw forward for the special council meeting that be held. No further notice requirement is needed as per Planning Act, and the bylaw drafted is included with the agenda package. So I know this hasn't been discussed with staff but it's a request, and if that can be considered, we will highly appreciate it so that we can save a couple extra weeks and get the building permit going. That concludes my comments, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, just before I go to the committee for questions, I'll say up front that it would not be possible to bring forward the application tonight because the agenda has been set and it is not on the agenda, and we're bound by notice requirements to do those kind of things. So that request is not going to be granted. The recommendation will probably go to the next council meeting if we get that far.
Yeah,
February 28th. Committee members, do you have any questions to the planner with regard to the application to remove the holding provision on the land zoned M3 on 238 3rd Concession Road? I see no questions from the committee, Rashika, so if you can just stand by, I'm going to ask the members of the public that are with us this evening if they have any comments with respect to 238 3rd Concession Road. And second and a third and a final time, there are no questions or comments from the public at this time, so I'm prepared to adjourn the public hearing unless the chief planning official has any additional information.
Through the chair, there's no additional information. Thank you.
Okay, then I will adjourn the public hearing and ask the committee how they wish to deal with this application. Councillor Bell. Okay, move that the recommendation as printed on the agenda be forwarded to the council for approval. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McAlpine. Discussion? Any final questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That was a favor. Now the motion is carried. And we'll proceed to the next public hearing, which is the last public hearing on our agenda this evening, and that is a an application from Boat Park Farms with regard to 35 Indian Line. And as the planner moves forward to the podium, I will declare the public hearing on this application open and ask the planner, as soon as she adjusts the microphone and the podium, to outline the proposal to the committee.
Thank you. I'll be presenting zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 4622 LG 35 Indian Line Road. Staff are recommending approval of this application. The subject lands are located south of Indian Line Road and on the north side of Jenkins Road in the geographic township of Oakland. The lands are irregular in shape, having a frontage of approximately 320 meters along Indian Line Road, as well as a frontage of approximately 401.7 meters along Jenkins Road, in an area of approximately 25.88 hectares. The subject lands contain a single detached dwelling and 3 accessory structures. There had previously been a storage barn on the severed lands, which was removed as a condition of consent application B1122AW. The surrounding area consists of agricultural land uses, and the subject lands are privately serviced. This application has 2 different parts. So part 1 proposes to rezone the severed lands from agriculture to agriculture with a site-specific provision, A190, to recognize the 7.5 meter height of one accessory structure. And part 2 proposes to rezone a portion of the retained lands from agriculture and natural heritage to agriculture with a site-specific provision, A191, and natural heritage in order to prohibit a dwelling and recognize the undersized farm parcel area of approximately 24.9 hectares. The zoning bylaw amendment is required as a condition of approved consent application B1122AW, which received conditional approval from the Committee of Adjustment on April 21st, 2022. The subject lands are designated as agriculture and natural heritage within the County of Brant official plan, and the current zoning is agriculture and natural heritage within the zoning bylaw 6116. No comments were received as part of the public circulation. It is my professional opinion that this request is appropriate and represents good planning, and therefore I recommend that the zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 4622 LG be approved. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? I see no questions, so I'll thank the planner and ask if the applicant is here to speak to the proposal.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay, we're on Zoom, and I believe it is Lucas Hildendag.
Yep. Correct. Good. Yeah, I just have no comments on that. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Lucas.
I have no comment regarding this.
Okay, the applicant is standing pat, as they say. Committee members, do you have any questions to the applicant with regard to this proposal? Okay, Lucas, there are no questions for you at this time. Just stand by, and I'm going to ask if there are members of the public in attendance who wish to speak to the application. Now is your opportunity. Would anyone like to speak to the application with regard to 35 Indian Line? And I see no members of the public coming forward at this time. So unless the planner has any final comments,
through the chair, there's no final comments. Thanks.
I will adjourn the public hearing with regard to the application 35 Indian Line and ask the committee how they wish to deal with the application. Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the recommendation.
And seconded by Mayor Bailey that the committee recommends the recommendation that is printed on the agenda to council for approval. Any final questions, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, and that recommendation will be going to council on February 28th. And that concludes the public hearings that are on the agenda. So we can move on to hopefully conclude the agenda by looking at the consent items, which there are none. There are no staff reports, and there are no communications. Is there any other business to come before the committee at this time? Seeing none, that there's no in-camera session. And it brings us to the last item on the agenda, and that's the next meeting. If you'll recall at the council meeting, I suggested that staff are of the opinion that the March 7th committee meeting is not necessary. There are no staff reports. There are no pending applications or public hearings. Planning General Manager Dusling, do you wish to just comment on your feelings about the next meeting?
Thank you, Chair Chambers. Yes, as identified last week at committee, or at council rather, because of Bill 109 complete application requirements, the planning division or department is seeing a lull in complete applications. So we do not have any applications to bring forward to the March meeting. As well, I will note that I'm very proud of the planning team. They've been working very hard over the last few months to keep applications moving forward, and they have moved a great volume forward. So I do think that they are entitled for a good break. So at that note, we would ask that there would be no March meeting, and we will be back in session for April.
Do you wish to comment on, there's an additional meeting scheduled that you may wish to comment on?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Chambers, for that reminder. As a side note, we have discussed with the clerks, and we will have 2 additional meetings coming forward in the month of May for the official plan. So that's a daytime meeting on the 29th of May, and there's a 5th Tuesday in the month of May. So we're hopeful to use that Tuesday for an evening meeting of the official plan as the statutory requirements.
And just a final comment, you may wish to elaborate. I believe there is a special report coming from from Adam Crozier with regard to process and discussion on how we proceed in light of the new planning regime that the province is putting upon us. Do you wish to comment on that?
Yes, and again, Chair Chambers is absolutely correct. Next Tuesday, Valentine's Day, we'll be bringing forward a report as requested by Council about our cycles and how they might work better with the timelines. And we have some great options coming forward for Council to consider.
So knowing that there are going to be 3 additional meetings, and knowing that we're in a lull, and knowing that there will be probably a busy time period after the next period, does anyone wish to bring forward an issue that we would deal with at the next meeting, or would someone like to make a recommendation to council that the March 7th Planning Committee meeting be canceled at this time? I see a motion from Councillor House, and I see a seconder, Councillor Oakley, and I hear a sigh of relief from the planning department. And just to say that I haven't called the question yet, so I will now. All those in favor of canceling the March 7th Planning Committee meeting? Opposed? That motion is carried. So I guess we will adjourn this meeting and reconvene in April, other than the additional planning committee.